This podcast was produced from a webinar. For a more interactive experience with visuals, visit advancedmanufacturing.org/webinars.
Welcome to another SME Media webinar. I'm SME Media Senior Editor Michael McConnell. Today we will explore the topic, reducing scratches, noise, and downtime in sheet metal fabrication. This presentation is sponsored by Replacement Brush Tables, and we're joined by Gach, Lead Engineer, and Jeff Fettig of the RBT Sales Team. Now I'm going to turn things over to Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Great, Mike. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Yeah. So before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you again to the team over at SME. Sam and his team, working with them over the past year has been really amazing. We appreciate the direction and the guidance and the exposure. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Jeff Fettig. I'm here with my colleague, Greg Gach. Greg and I collectively have about 20 years of experience in the brush business, primarily focused on material handling. So we always joke around here that we might be experts in bed brush and in brush, but we're still students. We're still constantly learning about some of the challenges that our customers face in the material handling world. And we're really grateful that we're able to travel around the country and visit a lot of facilities and kind of see what these challenges are firsthand. So today we're going to kind of package what we've learned along the way and hopefully present it in a way that can be helpful for others. So with that said, I'm going to open things up with our agenda for the day. We're going to talk, Greg's going to jump on here in a minute and talk a little bit about Brush 101, give us kind of a high-level explanation of bed brush, some of the material options that you have or the design options that you have. We kind of say we're like a bakery here. We have all of the ingredients. We just want to put them together in the right ratios to make sure that they're serving your application correctly. He's going to mention some of the common applications. I'm sure some of the attendees will be familiar with some of these things that they've seen in their facilities. He'll talk about the industries we serve. And then from there, we're going to transition into a discussion specifically on turrets, punches, lasers, and benders, and the importance of setting up a preventative maintenance schedule for these machines. Within that conversation, we'll talk about some of the design options and some of the customization options that our end users have available to them. And then we'll wrap it up with some concrete steps on how we can implement and adopt some of these practices and products into your facilities to help you with some of your scratching and cosmetic challenges. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg.
Thank you. So some of you might be asking, what are brush tables? In short, brush tables are a solution to reduce and or eliminate any scratching, noise, and downtime in sheet metal fabrication. It's essentially a surface composed of two parts. It's a base and a fill, which is the brush. And that just helps transfer material without the use of transfer balls. It's a good alternative to them. Why are we talking about them today? Because in sheet metal fabrication, surface quality matters and equipment downtime and defects are costly. Some common names out there other than brush tables are brush plates, brush panels, bed brush, staple set brush. So we often get asked how they're made, what are they made of? So you have your base. Our most popular bases are plastics, so our PVC, our HDPE, our Delrin, and our more flexible solution is UHMW. For our high temp applications, we have phenolic, brass, aluminum, and aluminum clad. What we do for our fill material is typically nylon. We have various qualities depending on the application. We have PEX for our food industry. That's we have some FDA rated fills that we can use. And our high temp, we have brass and flame retardant nylon. Color options, we typically go with a black, but we can do any color that someone would like. So what are we trying to solve with brush? I'm going to compare a lot to transfer balls. It's the most common one out there in the facilities that we go to. And basically those transfer balls, they scratch, they scuff, and they blemish your material as you're moving it. Our brush solutions are going to be tailored to your material needs, and we can eliminate all of that that's scuffing. Noise and vibration from the transfer balls. Brush is just quiet. It eliminates that vibration, reduces the operator's fatigue. And another thing is traditional methods, there's nowhere for that debris to go. So the brush lifts your material off of the surface, and any debris can fall away so you don't mar your material while you're using it or handling it. So common applications, Jeff's going to go in a little bit about turrets, but in this upper left picture, you can see an assembly table. So these are typically made to order. They're going to be any size, any shape. We can do anything you need. And that we also have a stock program, but these workstations are typically customized to your needs. I can't stress how often I go into a facility, I see cardboard, carpet, towels, duct tape. This is so much of an improvement over that. So if you're not using this, I highly recommend it. Conveyors, the most popular one is if you're familiar with Salvagnini, they have an S4 turret. This conveyor moves the material away automatically from the shear. Our brush conveyors are a great alternative to gravity rollers. Transfer ball replacement, we have an extensive catalog of direct replacements for stainless steel and nylon balls. If you have the OEM part number, we can usually cross-reference it in our system, so we just need that. If we've never done it, we'll work with you to reverse engineer it, and it's basically a plug-and-play option, direct fit. People love that solution. Press brake arms typically come with stainless steel or roller balls, which again, scratch up the surface of that material. We can design a panel that fits directly on those arms. You mount it, and it's a great alternative to the bare bones, helps you lift those larger objects. Sometimes it can eliminate a 2-person job into a 1. And then in the bottom right, you'll see a PEM application. We have a unique brush design for PEM. This allows any size fastener to freely move around between those brush tufts. It doesn't bump into anything. Omnidirectional. People love that solution. And then on the left here, you'll see this blue cart. We have a really great program for carts, racks, vertical storage. These are usually made to order solutions when you want to transport material horizontally and vertically. This is really popular in the window and cabinetry industry. Some additional industries we serve: HVAC, medical, window and door, furniture, cabinetry, commercial food service equipment, generator and electrical housings, overhead door manufacturers, you name it. So some things that we're going to design on our end and consider is the gauge of your material. On the left here, you'll see a stiffer bristle. On the right is our softest. This is a 5/1000th of an inch bristle. We will use this for those mirror polishes, medical grade equipment, anything where you need a very, very perfect finish. You know, a 12 gauge material is going to need a different brush layout than a 24 gauge. So some additional considerations that we work on in design is the height and diameter of that bristle. The tuft spacing, there's a few patterns we use. We use a straight pattern. On the slide here, you're going to see our angled pattern. We do staggered for smaller parts and heavier applications. And all these things affect the load density and the gliding properties of your material. Base material, I previously touched on the types, but we can also customize the height. Sometimes there's some tight tolerances that we need to accommodate. Also, if we're mounting on our panels on solid surfaces or latticed frames, we can get away with a thinner base on the solid surface, but if you've got those large gaps, we need to compensate for support with a thicker base. For mounting, you're more than welcome to do your own mounting holes on site. However, we can also countersink, counterbore through custom cutouts, whatever you need. Wear options here. Jeff is going to touch on this a little bit later with turrets, but this is essentially how dense, how close we bring that brush in. Again, this is all dependent on your application, surface area, weight, density, heavy duty and abrasive applications. They all need something specific. We'll also consider the thermal considerations. This is where that flame retardant and brass fill are going to come into play. Anywhere there's excessive heat, such as welding or lasers. We do a lot of welding stations, and brass is super popular for that. Doesn't catch on fire, doesn't melt, it's great. So with that layout, the pattern here on the left is our straight pattern. It's our most common for smaller gauge, lighter aluminums, easily slides across it, no restrictions. In the middle on the right, you're going to see some of the more heavy duty applications. That center one specifically, people a lot of times will ask what's like the maximum weight the brush can hold. And the one in the middle there is well over 200 pounds a square foot. So the brush is more than capable for any application you might have. And that concludes my section of the presentation. I'm going to hand it back to Jeff.
Great, thank you, Greg. So we're going to circle back to some of the options and variables that Greg mentioned in his presentation, but I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about brush maintenance for specifically for turrets, punches, punch laser combos, and benders, and specifically about why it's so critical to include your brush tables into a preventative maintenance schedule that you're reviewing on a regular basis. I'm also going to spend some time talking about a couple of common upgrades that we can help facilitate in your turret punch and laser operations. So, you know, I mentioned earlier, Greg and I are in and out of facilities a lot, and we know that quality managers and maintenance managers, these guys and gals, they're putting out fires from sun up to sundown across a variety of shifts. I mean, these are really, really busy people. They're working on hydraulics, servos, they're coordinating techs come in to keep these machines running. But it's kind of our mission to make sure that the work surface isn't getting overlooked. You know, we want to make sure that our customers and our end users are trained and identified, trained on identifying wear areas and matting and other parts of wear and damage that could cause an uneven work surface, which can ultimately lead to, you know, a dangerous situation, even sometimes a crash. So, you know, when you take a look at this example here that you have in front of you, this is the ideal work surface. The tufts are clean. There's ample spacing between the tufts to allow debris to fall. There's no matting, so you don't risk any debris being trapped on the surface. You don't see any melting, and you don't see any hot spots. So this is kind of what your end goal is as you're doing visual inspections of your assets. So what we do on our end is, in the way that we support our customers in this, is that we maintain and we constantly maintain and develop a very robust catalog of replacement panels across all the OEMs that you see here on the screen. And we also, in many of the cases, stock these. So if you do have a crash or a reason that, you know, the machine is down because of the brush tables, we can expedite, we can do same-day shipping, just really to keep that work surface as pristine as possible and keep you up and running. So we've seen a good, we've seen a good example, and maybe now let's take a look at an extreme bad example. And I'll show you more things to look for later on in the presentation. And this is a glaring example, you know, just to be used for the point of discussion, but this is something that a maintenance manager might come across when inspecting their assets. And when you see this type of wear on areas of the table, obviously you're going to get scratching, but you're going to get an uneven work surface that could potentially induce a crashing situation, which not only can be dangerous, you know, we want to keep our operators safe, but it's also going to create downtime. You're going to have to pull the machine offline in order to get the panels up to speed before you can bring it back online. And so that's really what we want to help with. We also get a lot of feedback. You know, brush tables are kind of a really quick visual point of reference. So with a lot of our job shop customers, you know, they're having potential new customers coming into their facility regularly. and they tell us that, you know, having a clean and pristine work surface, that's kind of like that signals a visual commitment to quality. So your customer's saying, okay, these guys, they take care of their machinery, they keep everything up to speed, so they obviously care about the quality of the product. So that's just kind of an added benefit to keeping your surfaces up to speed. Okay, so Greg mentioned earlier, you know, we have a lot of tricks up our sleeves on our end, and our field work has led us to a lot of design improvements, you know, based on customer feedback and on working with the operators. You can see in the photo on the left-hand side here, if you look up closer to the bending action on that horizontal photo, you can see that we've tightened the spacing of those tufts. So this particular bender has 1 inch spacing between their tufts. The customer asked to be able to get some more life out of the panels because they were finding that they were having to replace them too frequently. And in this particular case, they required a lot of downtime. It was a very timely process to be able to get these panels off and then new panels back on again. So in this case, we tightened the pattern and it extended the life of the brush considerably. And you know, that's a visual, and you can see the same concept in the right-hand side photo. We call that high wear, where we take a standard pattern that you see on the right, and we, you know, so to speak, we beef it up to get more life out of the brush panel. But there are a lot of things that we can do that you don't notice so much with the eye that could improve the functionality of the brush. And that might be changing the bristle diameter, the individual bristles, making it softer, making it stiffer. Sometimes it improves the functionality of the brush if we lengthen or shorten the trim. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, we have a lot of options. We just have to work with you and figure out what your end goal is. You know, you'll find that as you start noticing these things more and more as maintenance managers, you'll learn to very quickly determine where the problem, what the troublemakers are and the areas on each of your benders and turrets. And you want to keep an eye on those spots, whether it's right next to the laser, right up near the bending action. You'll see the patterns. And we typically recommend that with those panels, you have stock on hand so that you can switch it out in the event that you do have scheduled maintenance and you're not waiting for something to ship when it gets too late and when you start having cosmetic issues. So we can take a look at here on this screen. We call this demystifying the ordering process. So as much as we're in the manufacturing business, we're also in the content management business. We spend a great deal of time kind of synthesizing and organizing across the variety of OEMs manuals to make the ordering process as easy as possible for our customers. So on the left-hand side, that's a screenshot of our website where you can very quickly go and find your make and model. And if you don't have, you know, the OEM part number on hand that you need, you can request an RFQ based on something that looks like that layout on the right-hand side. So, you know, you say, oh, I've got a lot of wear on panels 17 and 18. My manual is not matching up with the actual machine on my floor, which happens quite a bit. So we've got our library catalog so that you can quickly find the panel that you need and request the quote that way. You know, it's incredible how much it comes up that our guys in the field, they're trying to keep these machines running, and maybe they have a limited edition or a low production model, and they either don't have a manual, maybe they bought it secondhand, or the manual that they do have from the OEM, the brush tables don't correspond with the layout, that's the physical layout that they have. So we're here to support in that, and in a lot of cases, when we come on site, we will make them a custom layout that they can have on hand, so then they can just very quickly point and ask for what they need for when it's time to replace the panels in order. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the upgrades that we see and that we can help facilitate in the field. This is Greg mentioned earlier, transfer balls. We see a lot of older models. You see this example on the left. The customer had an older model with roller balls. They were repurposing the punch for a different line that had a much more sensitive finish, and they just could not tolerate the scratches. So we've got a couple options here. There are options where we can just plug and play and drop in a transfer brush that fits exactly where the ball went. You see that in the center picture. And in some cases, this is not a possibility, and we can simply replace the entire surface with solid brush. And this method requires a little bit of additional engineering on the customer's part, but it's a phenomenal upgrade. It breathes life back into the machine, and it allows it to be used, like I said, maybe on different parts that are more scratch sensitive. Another common request that we see are if you've been asked to increase your sheet capacity, so you're making a larger part and the table that you have is not large enough to accommodate that sheet. So you can see on the left-hand side there that the sheet's drooping off the table. We see this a lot. So a very simple solution are extension tables that you can flank the turret or the shear with. We can make these panels to match the exact OEM specs that are on the rest of the table, or we can customize them and improve on them, essentially to make them last longer and give them a better design. So we're going to transition here and talk about an implementation strategy. Sometimes our customers don't know where to start. So we talked about some of the benefits, but the approach is different if you're looking at upgrading your workstations and your manual workstations versus if you're replacing panels on a turret, laser, or bender. So let's take a look at some of the workstations first. I've got some images here that you might see across your facility. You'll notice that in the first two pictures there on the left and in the center, you've got a hard surface. We're trying to do some pen insertion on one, and the other one is more of a transfer table where it's coming off of a roller, I believe. And then in the last picture, you see cardboard. Now, whenever you see cardboard in a facility, that's typically an immediate signal that would be a great application for brush. You know, the cardboard traps adhesives and staples and all different kinds of scrap that the operator is using on their fabrication process. And it has to be replaced on a regular basis. So this would be a great place to put brush to protect whatever it is that the operators are working on. So, you know, as you're walking around your facilities and you're identifying potential areas of need, it's always good to have create that feedback loop with your operators. You know, nobody knows better than them. They're quote unquote in the trenches with the process, with the machine day in day. They know what the trouble areas are, so they're going to be an excellent resource to find out what areas could use the upgrade and use the improvement. So once you have an idea of what you might want to start with, the next step would be to request a sample kit. So we have a very a wide spectrum of samples that are available because not every application is the same. They range anywhere from supporting up to 100 pounds per square foot to hundreds of pounds per square foot. It also matters what the process is that you're doing. Are you looking to transfer material across the brush? Are you doing a fabrication process on the surface of the brush? We like to know a little bit about that before we recommend and before we curate a sample kit for you, so that what you receive on your end is going to be useful for your application. And then from there, you know what you're doing better than anybody. So if you want the brush tweaked in any way, you want a longer trim, shorter trim, you need it a little bit softer, a little bit firmer, that's where you can work with the sales engineer on our side to kind of dial it into exactly what you need. Again, going back to the concept of we're a bakery, we have all of the ingredients. We do not believe in a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we really want to make sure that the brush is doing exactly what you need. And there's a couple ways you can email, check out our website. You can find ways to get a hold of us, whether it be through an email or a phone call. And there's always sales engineers available to kind of work you through those first steps. Now, the topic of maybe you're interested in setting up a regular preventative maintenance schedule for your brush tables. I've got some more pictures here. The picture on the bottom left, we've already seen. That's kind of an extreme example, but it's not always that obvious where the scratching is coming from. So again, your starting point is going to be with your operators and the people who are running the machines, and they're pulling the parts off the machines. Talk to them first. They probably know and are more than happy to tell you and to help if you ask them. But some other areas that you can look for on that center picture, these look like sea urchins, right? This is where the brush has become splayed and pressed down, and it's eliminated that space between the material and the base. So that's kind of a visual indicator that you're going to want to replace that. And then on the very far bottom right, this is also common, especially in high temp applications where you see a matting of the brush. So it's almost like the surface of it has melted together. And that really defeats the whole point of brush. You know, as Greg mentioned, the whole point of brush is to have a space where the debris can fall away from the omnidirectional movement and avoid scratching. If the debris can't fall away, it's going to sit on top, and this brush panel here is going to be no different than a piece of outdoor carpet or a piece of cardboard. So this is something else you can look for. The matting, the sea urchins, obvious wear. And again, sometimes it's not that obvious. You're going to have to crawl up into the machine or really watch the machine operate and see if you can identify where the marks are coming from when the part comes off of the machine. Kind of a simple out of the gate starting point that we recommend for our customers is to start by upgrading or replacing, or in some cases putting in new for the first time, station dies and tooling brush. You can see a couple examples here. These are typically the circular pieces, very small, sometimes very hard to see if you don't have a flashlight and you're not crawling into the punching turret area. You wouldn't even know they were there. We work with people all the time that say, oh, I didn't even know that these were on the turret. But this is a very cost-effective kind of maybe step one if you're having scratching issues. These are parts that can be ordered directly from our website and shipped same day. And again, it's a really simple, cost-effective way to start that process of scratch elimination. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to Greg here. He's going to kind of summarize what we talked about and give us some ideas for the next steps.
Yeah, so brush, it's going to save you in rework, labor, replacement parts. The advantage of working with us, we're a US based company. Jeff and I are in Southeast Michigan. We have another facility in Central California. We have quick lead times. Typically it's 2 to 3 weeks or less. We also have an extensive stock program. We offer one-on-one design help. We'll do on-site visits, and we'll help you do customized layouts. So I think we are all set, and I think we were going to open up to Q&A if there are any questions.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for a great presentation. It looks like we did receive a few questions from the audience. So a reminder to our attendees to get your questions in now while we still have our experts here. And if we'll get started. Here's a question. What is the lifespan of the product?
Yeah, so typically I'm going to reference the turrets because those are typically in a facility running 3 shifts. A brush table is going to probably get you 3 to 5 years, depending on the material being run, but I would say 3 years minimum. And then a workstation even longer, because I don't think they're getting as much constant contact as they are on that turret, especially if there's an automated system set up where you have an auto feeder or a night train that's just running 24/7. You'll get years out of it. And then again, Jeff was mentioning the high wear options. We can even increase that if we're adding more brush.
And do you have stock options available?
Yeah, so we do, well, yes, absolutely stock. Some of our high wear or high use panels, and as I mentioned, the tooling brush that go on turrets, we stock many of those. We also stock workstation options when people are in a pinch, but 95% of what we do is custom because everybody's application is different. And people tend to get a little nervous when they hear the word custom, but that's just kind of how our production process is set up. Every order is unique. It doesn't make it any more expensive or inexpensive if we're making it or stocking it. We just really want to make sure that the customer gets what fits their application.
Well, here's a natural follow-up to that. So
Sure.
talking about custom, what have you. What are your lead times?
Greg?
Yeah, sure. So typically a standard lead time is 2 to 3 weeks. It can be quicker. We do often get calls where a machine is down due to a crash. We totally understand that happens. More than happy to move some things around. Depending on the size of it, it is possible to get something out in 1 to 2 days. We have some rush options if you're not quite in that much of a hurry where you have a down machine, but we could work with you to get something out in about a week. Yeah, which in this industry is pretty quick. We've received feedback. I've heard months from other suppliers. So 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty aggressive lead time in this industry.
Okay. I want to remind our listeners that you're welcome to submit questions.
Yeah, I think to Greg's point, we're an onshore supplier, and really our mission here is to keep the guys in the field up and running and to really support the sheet metal fab industry as best we can. So we're positioned and we're flexible to be able to work one-on-one with whatever, it could be a job shop, it could be a 2 million square foot facility. We're focused on you and keeping your machines running and your processes smooth. And that's kind of the backbone and the philosophy of what we do. And it's reflective.
Flexibility is really important.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No.
That flexibility is really important to what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have. I do want to thank both of you, Greg and Jeff from RBT, for joining us today and sharing such a great presentation on the topic. I also want to thank our attendees for your participation and those great questions. We hope you found the content valuable and that you're going to join us again soon. Until then, remember that SME and SME Media are here to help you stay up to date on all things manufacturing. You can find links to podcasts, webinars, publications, and news by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org.